Hi, and welcome back to Scratch, where we help you scratch that cooking itch. Today, we're going to make corned beef and hash. Let's get started. To make our corned beef, we'll need 2 pounds of the flat cut of a beef brisket, 3 bay leaves, a half gallon of water, a cup of rock salt, a quarter cup of sugar, 2 tablespoons of minced garlic, 2 teaspoons of red pepper flakes, 2 teaspoons of ground cinnamon, 2 teaspoons of ground ginger, a teaspoon of molasses, a teaspoon of black pepper, a teaspoon of ground mustard, a teaspoon of ground coriander, a teaspoon of ground allspice, and a half teaspoon of ground cloves. For our hash, we'll need our brined corned beef, 3 to 4 russet potatoes, an onion, 2 tablespoons of butter, a tablespoon of olive oil, a tablespoon of minced garlic, 2 teaspoons of Worcestershire sauce, a half teaspoon of dried thyme, a half teaspoon of dried oregano, a half teaspoon of dried basil, a half teaspoon of salt, and a half teaspoon of black pepper. We'll start the brine for our corned beef by filling a large pot with about a half gallon of water. Then we'll heat our water on the stovetop over medium heat and crumble in our 3 bay leaves and pour in our cup of rock salt, quarter cup of sugar, 2 tablespoons of minced garlic, 2 teaspoons of red pepper flakes, 2 teaspoons of ground cinnamon, 2 teaspoons of ground ginger, teaspoon of molasses, teaspoon of black pepper, teaspoon of ground mustard, teaspoon of ground coriander, teaspoon of ground allspice, and half teaspoon of ground cloves, and allow it to simmer until all of our salt is dissolved. About 30 minutes, stirring occasionally, before allowing it to cool to room temperature. About 2 hours, before transferring our brining liquid to a large bowl or container. Then, we'll pat our flat cut of beef brisket down with paper towels to remove any excess moisture before adding it to our brine. We'll cover it in plastic wrap and allow it to brine for 5 days in the refrigerator, turning the meat in our brine on day 3. Once our meat has finished brining, we'll preheat our oven to 400 degrees Fahrenheit and rinse our potatoes and dice them into approximately half-inch cubes. Once diced, we'll mix our potatoes with our tablespoon of oil, half teaspoon of dried thyme, half teaspoon of dried oregano, half teaspoon of dried basil, half teaspoon of salt, and half teaspoon of pepper in a large bowl and spread them evenly on a baking sheet. We'll cook these in the oven at 400 degrees Fahrenheit for about 40 minutes. While the potatoes are roasting, we'll peel and dice our onion, remove our corned beef from our brine, trim the fat cap off, and cut our corned beef into approximately 1-inch cubes. Then we'll melt our butter on the stovetop over medium-high heat and cook our onion and garlic until the onions are translucent, before adding in our corned beef and cooking until browned, about 8 minutes. Once our potatoes are done roasting, we'll add them to our skillet with our 2 teaspoons of Worcestershire sauce and stir until the potatoes and meat are cooked through, about 4 more minutes. We can serve our corned beef and hash as is, or with an egg. I hope you enjoyed this recipe. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and sign up to my channel for more delicious recipes like this one.